happened today, earlier in Madrid. Well, as I said, the tournament is almost over. At least we know the name of the winner. And we can congratulate Jan Nepomniachtchi, which secured the first place with one round to go. Quite an achievement. Congratulations to Jan. And of course, we're all looking forward to his next match, next edition of his battle against Magnus Carlsen. Hopefully Magnus will play this match and will witness once again this amazing encounter. But let's see how Jan managed to secure this first place. It was quite an easy task, even though his opponent opted for a very risky line of the Sicilian, which is known as the Rouser variation, where two knights are being developed, and then black is trying to seek some counter chances, but Jan opted for a very solid line with capturing on c6 first. Then, after bishop takes c6, because otherwise e5 might be very unpleasant, some ideas with e5 here. So bishop takes c6 is almost forced. f3. And here, since this pawn on d6 is quite weak, black has to play d5. That's what happened in the game. But in that case, there are many exchanges that are following. Bishop takes c3 is almost forced as well, because after bishop a5, some very funny looking line with a queen sacrifice might appear. But this position, yeah, you can play for a win with black, but mathematically speaking, I mean, white has an advantage here, so it's quite risky to play. The compensation is not enough. That's why Rapport exchanged pieces, and here after bishop e5 more exchanges are coming up, and we end up in an approximately equal endgame. It's not fully equal just yet. Actually, there was a game by Radmir Halmov back in 1991, which he won with white. So it's white who pushing a little bit because of this unfortunate structure. There are more weaknesses on the black side. So it's quite it's black who has to be careful here. And of course, it was quite an easy task for Jan to exchange even more pieces, more pawns, and quite soon the game ended in a draw. In this position, the players agreed on a draw. Once again, congratulations to Jan. Another amazing tournament, another amazing victory, and hopefully we're gonna see Carlsen-Nepomniachtchi match in 2023. Let's go on and discuss three other games that were of course in the shadow of Jan's victory, but nevertheless the players are still in the fight for the second place. They still need to work hard and play hard and try to finish this tournament strongly. Okay, let's get going. Let's discuss the game between Radjabov and Caruana. It was a very well prepared game by Fabiana Caruana. We saw another Catalan opening with bishop b4 and a5. Caruana played he demonstrated a great preparation. He opted for quite a rare line with many exchanges and temperate sacrifices. c5, d takes c5, knight c6, like the key position of the line that black went to play. And here the main question is whether it's possible to take on b6, or it's better not to take on b6, it's better to refrain from taking, since Radjabov didn't seem to be ready for quite an aggressive approach from Caruana's side. He didn't dare to take on b6, and of course it's quite, it does look quite risky to keep winning these pawns with the king in the center. It's quite hard to castle for the moment because the pawn on e2 is under attack, and after queen b3, e5 might follow with the idea to play e4 and then followed by knight d4, and well, white has three extra pawns, but most likely the compensation is not enough, and most likely Caruana knew the way to prove that his compensation is enough for equality. Queen d2 was played. Still, white has an extra pawn, but the players reached quite a classical endgame for Catalan, where one extra pawn on the b file is not doing a lot of things. I mean, it's enough for black to blockade it and either win it back or just make it impossible for white to improve the situation, to improve the position. And that's why Radjabov decided to give this pawn away, not to let black's rook to get to the second rank and maybe win even more than one pawn. But after knight c4, all the pieces got exchanged and we saw another draw by repetition. And we get going, and we are about to discuss a game between Firouzja and Liren, another grandmaster draw with a great preparation by Liren. Quite a rather strange choice by Firouzja, because this opening for knight's game opening is played usually for white to secure a draw or to avoid any risk. And actually we've seen a game like this even in this tournament. I think Jan played against Liren, right, already, and made a draw in almost the same identical way. After h6, pieces are exchanged on f6, and the knight is getting to f5. Black exchanges this knight for the bishop, and we get an endgame with opposite color bishops. Yes, some pressure from the white side, but again, Liren demonstrated his preparation. He played h5, he sacrificed his pawn, but proved that due to a very strong center, white is not able to improve the position. So f4 is almost obliged, because otherwise black is going to play f4, a5, f4, and yeah, well, g4. Firouzja tried to push these pawns forward, but after bishop h4, they are stopped on the king side, g5, and apparently white cannot break through. Firouzja tried, but we see that the center is coming up, and if one day these pawns, the central pawns, start to move, it can be quite unpleasant for white. So that's why white even sacrificed a bishop. But since this bishop is quite trapped, it was quite a funny looking positional draw. Almost a study-like, I must say, because well, the king cannot really go, I mean, even if it gets too far away, rook f6, rook c5 will follow, and all the pawns are gonna be lost. quite an interesting game, quite a tense draw, but the speed with which Dinklage played this endgame was amazing, and it looked very easy for him to make a draw, although the things were quite far from obvious. And no, we haven't discussed the game between Nakamura and Duda. And what can I say? It was a very complicated game. So I will just briefly go over it, highlighting the most important moments. We've seen the same Najdorf that Nakamura used against Firouzja in this tournament with knight f3. Firouzja, let me remind you, played knight c6 after bishop c4. Nakamura won quite convincingly. It was not because of knight f6, of course, but nevertheless, Duda decided to change. He played bishop e7. He opted for another line, but somehow he didn't feel very well prepared. He was spending time, and Nakamura used quite a tricky idea of just getting his knight to g6 or to f5, right? If the bishop takes on b3, then the knight would go to f5. And here, I'm not sure what was going to happen after short side castle, which looked pretty logical. But again, who knows, maybe knight g6 was the idea. And with the idea to take on e7 and to play this kind of structure, trying to put some pressure via the d file on this pawn, because this exchange, the knight for the bishop, with the dark squared bishop, usually favors white. Who knows? Anyway, long short side castle hadn't been played. Knight a5 followed, but then the pawns are doubled, the knight went to g6, and the position became quite, well, unpleasantly looking, I can say, for black. After king f7, I believe knight takes e7 is the plan, with then bringing the bishop to a3 and again putting some pressure onto d6. But since black didn't try to attack this knight immediately, then it got supported by the h-pawn. And I'm not so sure what's better, to force it to get exchanged for this bishop or to leave it on the board supported by the pawn and annoy. It's quite an annoying piece. Okay, knight to d1. Well, Nakamura played very well and outplayed Duda. But here something started to go wrong. Probably it was easier just to capture on e7 and play b4. Quite a pleasant position. Instead, Nakamura decided to keep the knight on the board, but it gave a possibility for this guy, for this knight, to activate. And as I said, it was already Duda at some point who started to push for an advantage. So somewhere here, white misplayed quite seriously, quite a bit. So for the moment, everything is fine for white, but then at some point it just starts to be very bad. So let's try to figure out what exactly and when went wrong for white. Probably this move was not accurate. Probably it was needed to choose something else. Maybe rook d3 was more precise in order not to get under tempo, under attack to bishop g5. Or maybe here f4 or a bishop a3 needed to be played. Hard to say, because the position is quite complicated. Still, it looks pretty pleasant for white. But white played rook f to d1, and suddenly after bishop g5, rook d3, this rook c2 idea is very unpleasant. So probably, yeah, probably Nakamura did not evaluate this b5, bishop g5 line correctly. After bishop a3, black could have played b4, bishop b2, a4, and suddenly it's black who is starting to push, because even though white's pieces are placed very well, it's not so clear how to break through, while black is ready to attack on the queen side. And at this position, black has even more chances than white. But d5 was played, and again, the advantage went to white. Quite a funny looking line with some exchanges. But here, even though it's white who's pushing, it's black who needs to be careful. But it's about equal. Anyway, the position is about equal. It was needed just to take here and then probably play king h7. Not so obvious, of course, with those pieces on the 5th rank. But apparently, if we calculate everything till the very end, the draw seems to be as a very possible result. Knight c5 is still, well, it might be inaccurate because e takes d5 is so much easier. But white played d6. Rook f3 seems to be more precise, but again, it's quite hard to find such moves. d6 seems to be quite logical, but here black had to accept this sacrifice, even though the sacrifice is quite temporary because this pawn is about to get promoted. But here, due to the fact that this pawn is very advanced, black is more than okay. So again, it should be about equal, and it was needed. It was the only move for black to hold the position, because in the game, after this retreat, after the move knight d7 that Duda chose, the game is practically over. It's just this pawn is too strong. This knight becomes, I mean, he's always been strong, but thanks to the fact that there is no more pawn on d6, these pawns are hanging. And yeah, Nakamura, after that, after this very shaky and moment in the game, like for the last 10 moves, there were many ups and downs, but after that the situation stabilized. Hikaru got an advantage and he played pretty well too. Well, especially here, I mean, for example, I'm not sure about this king h2, probably it was slightly inaccurate, but maybe it's a very strong move. But nevertheless, black had to take on f2. It was his last chance. Maybe it's losing, maybe it's too late, but otherwise, otherwise the position is just simply lost after f3. And that's exactly what happened. Little by little, white got to this e pawns, and yeah, you see the pawn almost got promoted, and black resigned due to this nice little tactic. Well, quite a complicated game with chances for both sides, I must say. It definitely indicates that the players are tired already, but quite an important win for Hikaru. And we can have a look at the current situation. One round to go. Current situation.